All right, so recently Larry Elder appeared on The Breakfast Club and he destroyed them with facts and logic. It was such an intense sight to behold, truly enjoyable experience. So if you haven't seen it, you need to go and watch the full thing after this video. But I'm going to play some highlight clips of it. We're going to take a look at it together. Now, if you're not familiar with Larry Elder, he is running for president in 2024. He's an American right-wing political commentator and conservative talk radio host, very well known. And the Breakfast Club has been around for a while. It talks about all kinds of topics in popular culture and has all sorts of celebrity guests on. It's an American syndicated radio show based in New York City. It's hosted by DJ Envy and Charlamagne. They used to have Angela Yee on it, but now it's just DJ Envy and Charlamagne. And they also have rotating guest hosts and celebrities. So it's very popular, very well-known platform. And again, 4 days ago, they had Larry Elder on the show and he just absolutely demolished them, because what you'll often see on the Breakfast Club is the narrative of systemic racism being promoted. And not that they're promoting systemic racism per se, but the narrative of systemic racism at the core of America currently. And they believe that that is what is suppressing, especially the Black community in the United States. And Larry Elder, a Black man himself, destroys that narrative with facts and logic. So let's get into this. We're going to start at the very beginning when they ask him about why he's running for president. And he talks about the epidemic in society today, but it's not the one that you think about. Let's watch it together.
Well, I'm running as an America First mega guy, and we have an America First mega guy running, obviously. So the question is, what do you bring to the table?
You say MAGA?
MAGA.
Okay.
And the answer is, I bring a lot of issues to the table that I feel our side is not talking enough about, if at all. For example, the number one social problem in America, by far, is the epidemic not of COVID, but of fatherlessness. 70% of Black kids today enter the world without a father in the home, married to the mother, up from 25% back in 1965. Now 25% of white kids enter the world today without a father in the home, married to the mother.
Now, just let me stop right there and just pay attention to the fact that he is tossing out all kinds of stats and facts at them. And you'll notice how they respond. Do they respond in kind? Do they respond by engaging the facts and stats? Not exactly.
And the stats are clear. Even Barack Obama once cited them. If you're raised without a dad, you're 5 times more likely to be poor and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in jail. What's happened? In the mid-'60s, with I think the best of intentions, a Democrat named Lyndon Johnson launched what he called the War on Poverty. And since then, we have incentivized women to marry the government and incentivized men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility.
Oh, that right there needs to sink in. We're incentivizing women to marry the government. I'm not so sure that a lot of people really know that. I'm not so sure that that's common knowledge, but he's spitting facts here.
You know, when I say this to people, the pushback I get is, well, there are lots of things that are going on, systemic racism, poverty. Here's the problem. If you look at a young Black male aged 10 to 43, that's young to me because I'm 71 years old. A young Black man in that demo is 13 times more likely to be murdered than a young white man in the same demo. Young Black man, real young, 19 and under, the number one cause of preventable death is homicide, almost always at the hands of another young Black male. Same demo for whites, the number one cause of preventable death is unintentional deaths. That includes drug overdoses, automobile accidents, drownings. It's not until they get to number 4 that death is the cause. In America, 60% of the shootings, the robberies, and the homicides are committed by Black people, often against other Black people. Of the homicides in this country, half of them are Black victims, almost all killed by other Blacks. How do you explain that if it isn't for the absence of fathers? Are you prepared to say Black people are just genetically inclined to commit more crime? I doubt it. And the go-to reaction often is poverty and systemic racism. Here's the problem. 1940, when there was blatant racism, this is before Brown versus Board of Education, before the Civil Rights Act of 64.
So again, notice he's talking about prior to these things. He's going to give you some stats. Pay attention to this.
KKK was still alive and well. 87% of Blacks lived under the poverty line. Now it's about 14%. You can't blame it on poverty. You can't blame it on racism. It is the breakdown of the nuclear intact family, and neither side is talking about it. The left doesn't talk about it because they caused it with the welfare state, and our side does not talk about it because if you're white, you'll be accused of dissing single moms who are heroically raising these kids, or you'll be accused of being a racist, or if you're black, you'll be accused, as I was by the LA Times, of being the black face of white supremacy.
All right. So again, just to recap, he is tying the situation that blacks are experiencing in the black community to the war on poverty and to the welfare state rather than to systemic racism. He doesn't deny that there has been systemic racism in American history. He takes the position that there is no longer any more systemic racism. But what there is an epidemic of fatherlessness. And that is why there are difficulties in the black community, ones that he addresses on this show.
Nobody's talking about that. I am.
What are the reasons, if your statistics are right, what are the reasons that you think fathers aren't in the home?
As I said, it's because in the mid-'60s, Lyndon Johnson launched what he called the War on Poverty. In Charlamagne, literally, they sent social workers door to door in the inner city. I remember this, advising women of the availability of welfare provided there was no man in the house. It created an economic incentive for women to marry the government. Same thing with whites. In 1965, 8% of whites entered the world without a father in the home, married to the mother. Now it's about 25%, also up threefold. Look at census data, 1910.
So in other words, in the white community, whites are also experiencing this difficulty as well. It has also increased there.
1920, 1930, in places like Milwaukee, Chicago, Philadelphia, a young black kid was slightly more likely to be brought into a world with a father in the home married to the mother than a young white kid. We have incentivized this kind of bad behavior, and it's had a disproportionately bad effect on the black community.
Let me ask you a question. What do white people do wrong?
What do you mean, what do white people do? I'm not worried about white people.
No, just pay attention to this, okay? All right. We went from a very serious conversation with facts, stats, details, times, dates, places, names, faces, everything. And instead of engaging those points, Charlamagne just wants to make a beeline for what are white people doing wrong right now? What are white people doing wrong? In other words, it sounds like he personally feels attacked by what Larry is saying here. And he feels like, okay, well, this is just making the black community look bad. Let's talk about what white people are doing and make them look bad. That's the way it comes across. I don't know if that's his intention behind the question, but that's the way it looks to me. It certainly doesn't look good. All right, let's continue. And let's see that again.
And it's had a disproportionately bad effect on the black community.
Let me ask you a question. What do white people do wrong, Larry?
What do you mean, what do white people do? I'm not worried about white people. I'm worried about what's going on with us.
But if there's systemic racism in this country, which we know it is.
No, I don't say there is. You say there is. I don't believe that.
Oh, you don't believe?
All right, so that's where there's going to be a huge difference. Again, Charlamagne is big. The Breakfast Club is big on this notion that black people are experiencing all kinds of problems in society in America because of systemic racism and white supremacy. You'll hear that over and over and over and over from Charlamagne. And Larry does not believe that. And he has already presented some facts to destroy that narrative. Charlamagne doesn't grapple with any of that, not surprisingly, but he doesn't grapple with any of that. And he's not going to the rest of the interview. It's pretty interesting to watch. But he's going to continue to give them more facts and then dismantle this notion. So let's continue.
No, there used to be, obviously. Tell me what you think the number one systemic example of systemic racism is in America.
Oh man, there's so many.
Just give me the most important one you think.
At the top of mind, I'll probably say maybe mass incarceration. Maybe.
Really? During the Great Depression, when 50% of black adults were unemployed, you didn't have this kind of mass incarceration. It's the breakdown of the family.
I'm not going to. I agree with the family part. I'm a black man who is a father to his children, and I'm a happily married black man to a black woman. So I'm never going to argue with that part, But I just feel like everything is black with you. Black is wrong. Black people do this and black people do that.
Which is weird because if you watch Charlamagne, everything that he talks about is black, just from a different perspective. But oddly enough, from a very different perspective, he'll talk about white, 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 white too, usually in a very, very negative way. So I do think that there's a little bit of hypocrisy here, in even asking him this question.
And when I asked you what white people do wrong, you said you're not worried about white people at all.
I'm talking about the damage, disproportionate damage going on in the Black community. For example, look at these smash and grabs that are taking place in Los Angeles, where I live. There's a suburb called Glendale, where at a mall recently, a mob of 30 to 40 people, they had masks on, but one guy got popped. He was Black, and I think most of those who were doing this were Black. And in recent years and times, have been a number of these in places like Chicago, places like New York.
Yeah, and I'm seeing them daily on Twitter. I think there's a platform called In Wokeness or something like that, and they show just clips every day. It's pretty interesting.
If I were involved in something like that, Charlamagne, I grew up with a dad, just as you're raising your own children. I would have been more afraid of my father than I would about the cops catching me. These kids are afraid of neither. They don't have a father in the home. Cops are demoralized. They're pulling back. Their manpower is short. And as a result, you tell a bad guy you're less likely to be caught, convicted, incarcerated, crime goes up. They may be criminals, but they're not stupid. When you say, what do white people do? I mean, this is a country that has struggled mightily to get over its historic racism. There was a civil war. There was a big civil rights movement. This is the only majority white country that's ever elected a Black president, let alone reelected a Black president. The three biggest cities in America are New York, Chicago, LA. They all have Black mayors, even though no city has a majority of Black population. The president of Harvard is a Black female.
Listen to this. I mean, he is giving facts just left and right. And they're not going to grapple with this. They're going to continue to push the notion that there is systemic racism pervasive in America. And they're not grappling with the facts that he's putting out here, where you have key figures who are part of the system. In fact, they're in charge of the system in many cases as being a member of the government and a very high and influential person in the government. A president, mayors, AGs.
Martin Luther King in 1966, Charlamagne, gave an interview to the BBC. This is 2 years after the Civil Rights Act of 64 got passed. And he said, I'm amazed at how many positive changes there have been in America in the last 2 years. Why, if things keep going like this, we could have a Black president in about 40 years' time. Do the math. Right on cue, Barack Obama elected 2008. He didn't say there'll be a Black female president of Harvard, and there has been. He didn't say there are going to be Black CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, and there have been several. He didn't say the percentage of the House would equal the percentage of Black people in the population, and it does. He didn't say the three largest cities would have Black mayors, and they do. He didn't say the largest and most prestigious organization of doctors, the American Medical Association, would have 2 Black presidents, and there have been. He didn't say the most prestigious organization of lawyers, the American Bar Association, would have 2 Black presidents, and they have.
Again, he is just giving facts left and right, destroying them.
He said president, meaning at that point, I can feel that I've reached the mountaintop, which is the speech he gave right before he got assassinated the day before.
Now, notice this. Again, he is pointing to Martin Luther King predicting a Black president. And what I found interesting is also during this interview, I don't think it's part of the clips that I'm showing here, but what I found interesting is that he points out that since the time of Obama, you know, if there was all this systemic racism, well, why didn't he clear these things up? But in fact, since the time of Obama, racial tension has increased. Now, he's not talking about systematic racism. He's just talking about tension in everyday life. And I thought that's an interesting observation.
And now we act as if Barack Obama never even got elected. And we're still talking about systemic racism. It's not fair. It's wrong. And you're discouraging Black people from working hard. 1996.
Okay. All right. So we have a little bit of a shift here. We have another person being introduced. This is going to be a clip from Teslin Figaro. And so she's going to talk about systemic racism. And all throughout the interview, she is just going to get hung up on this issue and equivocating on the term system and systematic and failing to understand the distinctions that he is making. It's just, and it gets worse and worse and worse for her. Every time she opens her mouth, she looks worse and worse and worse. And what's funny is every time she opens her mouth, she's trying to make him look worse. She's trying to, do a gotcha. She's trying to get him and make him look bad. And every time it backfires. It's the most hilarious thing to watch. It's I highly recommend you watch just the full thing after this video, and you'll see what I mean. But you'll get a flavor for it here.
Mr. Elder, quick question. Let's just remove the word racism, since that seems to be a word that triggers, a conversation down the water hole. Let's just focus on the word system.
Okay.
You mentioned that the system was the one that discouraged. And again, we have no problem with agreeing that the family, the Black family, should certainly has some room for some improvement. But let's just focus on system.
Room for improvement?
System. Well, we're not going to go down that water. We're not going to go down that water hole. Let's get to the question. So the question is, you said that the system encouraged Black women to be single mothers, correct?
I said the welfare state, yes.
The welfare, the system. So who's in charge of the system? Who was in charge of the system?
All right, now notice her line of questioning here. Who is in charge of the system? And it's pretty vague here, right? She doesn't want to say systemic racism at the moment, though she believes there's systemic racism. She's dropping the word racism right now because she thinks that that's causing some confusion here. I don't think so. I think it's actually being more specific. She becomes a little bit more broad here, more general. I don't think that helps because we need to make some proper distinctions here. But notice the line of questioning here. And at the end of this line of questioning, you're going to get a nothing burger, a whole lot of nothing. Nothing was accomplished by this line of questioning because in the middle of the questioning, she most likely realizes, yeah, this doesn't really work. This isn't really a good argument. He's, refuting me. And so she ends up giving us nothing at the end. So, but just pay attention to the questions she's asking here.
Well, it was Democrats that passed it.
And who were Democrats? Were they Black or white at that time?
Well, at the time, majority of Black people were Democrats, as the majority of Black people are Democrats now.
Not the voters. I'm talking about the system. Remember, the main idea is the word system. Who was in charge of the system at the time? The Democrats at the
Who is in charge? Now, notice I'm stressing here. She's saying in charge. Why am I stressing that? Well, because she's actually going to change what she is asking, but kind of do a sleight of hand here. And say, no, I was actually asking something else. But here she's asking, who's in charge of the system? Watch this.
The system. I'm just going to Charlamagne's point about white or Black. Was it white Democrats in charge of the system or Black Democrats in charge of the system?
Well, if you're prepared to say that Lyndon Johnson did this viciously with an intent to destroy the Black family, I disagree. He did it with the best of intentions. And if you look at the New York Times, which is left wing, the Washington Post, which is left wing.
Notice she said, I didn't ask you that. Well, she didn't ask that, but it does get to her the point or the reason for her current line of questioning. And she's going to see that she's wrong. So she's going to end up switching her line of questioning to something else and pretending like that was the line of questioning all along. And at the end of the day, nothing was accomplished. She just ended up looking bad. It's pretty hilarious.
They cheered all of this.
Right. And what I'm asking was it white people. So I'm going to ask again in case my mic's not coming through clearly. Was it white people in charge of the system or Black people in charge of that system that helped break down the Black family? It's a simple yes, just a simple question. White or Black?
Well, you didn't have to go on welfare unless you voluntarily chose to go on welfare. The inducement was put there by Democrats, by the left.
Correct. Okay. Democrats,
most black people were Democrats and they voted for these white people.
Not voters. I said who's in charge of the system.
Well, who put them in charge?
Was Lyndon Johnson white or Black?
Who put them in charge?
Maybe that'll help you.
Fine. Lyndon Johnson was white.
Thank you.
Okay.
Now, that was the end of that part. Nothing was accomplished. Well, what's your purpose of asking these questions? Why even ask that? He says, okay, Lyndon B. Johnson is white. Okay, what do you get from that? He had already addressed the insinuation that this was somehow intentional to target the Black community and weaken them and harm them. He had already addressed that and said, no, there was no vicious intent. In fact, it was intended to help the Black community. It just so happens that it did not. But at the end of the day, she gives us nothing. She just says, okay, I rest my case. He was white. Okay, what did you accomplish? You didn't turn over anything that he said. You didn't refute anything he said. And you didn't substantiate your claim that there is systemic racism. And notice she's saying, again, who is in charge? We're going to see here in another clip in just a moment where they're going to return to this discussion. She's going to switch it around. And instead of saying who's in charge, she'll say, no, who created the system, right? Those are not the same thing. But she's going to pretend as if that's what she was getting at all along. And it's just Larry Elder, who's just incompetent and unable to really understand what she's asking. All right, let's continue.
But if your argument is that the reason he did it was because of racism, then I disagree. He did it because of
That's not my argument. I just asked you a simple question. Was he white or black? Charlamagne?
And Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani.
Nothing was accomplished there. Absolutely nothing. Okay. All right. So was he white or black? He was white. Okay. I rest my case. Well, all right. Thank you for that profound insight there. I forgot her name. Teslin. Yeah, that was incredibly enlightening. Thank you for that.
And Mr. Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, and I'm pretty sure everybody who just caught a RICO with him in Georgia, they all had fathers. They still ended up in jail. How did that happen?
This is, again, this just shows the level of ignorance on part of Charlamagne. And by extension, I would say the Breakfast Club. The level of discussions that they have is incredibly shallow, very ignorant, as if Larry Elder was really arguing that, well, if you have a father, you'll just never go to jail, as if that's what he was arguing. Really? What kind of silly question is this? I can't take this seriously. Well, Larry responds very well. Watch this.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody said if you have a father, you won't go to jail. Nobody said if you didn't have a father, you were going to jail. My father never.
But guess what you did say, Mr. Elder? I'm sorry, respectfully.
May I answer his question?
Guess what you did say.
May I answer his question?
Let him finish his statement, Ted.
Okay. My father never knew his biological father. He got thrown out of the house when he was 13 years old, 8th grade dropout, Jim Crow South, Athens, Georgia. Fast forward, my dad cleaned toilets, 2 full-time jobs cleaning toilets when I was growing up. Went to night school to get his GED, and then after that, he went to night school to learn how to operate a small restaurant. Age of 47, my dad saves his nickels and dimes from his job, starts a small restaurant near downtown LA. Fast forward, he retires in his 80s. He owned that restaurant. He owned property next door, plus the house that's still in our family. Not too shabby for somebody who did not know his biological father. It's not a death sentence. You still have choices. It's just much more difficult to raise a child on your own. Even Tupac Shakur said, I know for a fact, Tupac, excuse me. I know for a fact, had I had a father, I would have been more confident. I would have been more disciplined. End of quote.
Well, how did all those white men end up in jail when they still had fathers? The Trumps and the Giuliani. I'm just asking the question.
This is a silly question to ask. Why ask the question if it's not relevant to what Larry is presenting? It's a silly question. So it again just tells me Charlamagne is not following what Larry is saying very, very well here. And I thought he was very clear, very concise. And actually, I have this playing a little bit faster than normal. So he's speaking. In reality, he spoke actually slower than this. So I don't understand where is the breakdown in communication and why Charlamagne feels the need to, for a second time, ask this question. Well, Trump has a dad. Why did he go to jail?
Question: how did they end up in jail?
Because some people commit crimes.
No, sir. Stop. My apologies for interrupting you earlier. I just couldn't stomach the answer that I knew you were going to say.
Couldn't stomach the answer?
Yeah, I couldn't stomach because your actual answer to Trump being what was happening to him with the indictments, you actually said that.
Now, can you tell she's a little overly emotional here? I mean, and again, it's all throughout the interview. I've noticed that there's more emotions here than really arguments from the intellect. And you know what? That actually appeals to the average person. The average person is impacted more by emotions than they are actual logic and facts. So it's effective to be this way. Oh, I just couldn't stomach what you're saying. That's effective for the average person. But for somebody who really wants to think through the issues, that's inadequate. And it just comes across as a cheap shot.
No, sir. Stop. My apologies for interrupting you earlier. I just couldn't stomach the answer that I knew you were going to say.
Couldn't stomach the answer?
Yeah, I couldn't stomach because your actual answer to Trump being what was happening to him with the indictments, you actually said that the system was doing it. You said there was a 2-tier system. This is your words.
That's right.
It was a 2-tier system. So when it came to Trump, all of a sudden you now believe in this systematic thing that's happening to Trump. But then when it happens to black people,
you see what she's doing here? I'm gonna play it again. But do you see what she's doing here? She's equivocating on the term system. And it's just such a very basic concept. I don't understand why she's doing this, but obviously he is not equating the system that leads to this issue with Trump, who's a white man. He's not equating that system with systemic racism, which is supposedly supposed to be something that is institutionalized and suppresses the Black community. Very different situation, very different thing. Two very different systems, if you will. They all might result from the government, but they are systems manifesting in very, very different ways, in laws and in the way that laws are enforced. So there's some serious distinctions that are at play, and he's making them not only in his intellect, but also verbally. But she's not making those distinctions, and then she's just equivocating on the term system. Oh, well, if there's any kind of system at play in this situation of being unfair against Trump in comparison to some things that Biden has done, well, if there's a system there, then I got you. You believe in systemic racism. Wait, what? Just because we're using the same word doesn't mean we're referring to the same concept. Watch.
Some people commit crimes.
No, sir. Stop. My apologies for interrupting you earlier. I just couldn't stomach the answer that I knew you were going to say.
Couldn't stomach the answer?
Yeah, I couldn't stomach, because your actual answer to Trump being what was happening to him with the indictments, you actually said that the system was doing it. You said there was a two-tier system. This is your words.
That's right.
It was a two-tier system. So when it came to Trump, all of a sudden you now believe in this systematic thing that's happening to Trump. But then when it happens to Black people,
it's not about race. It's not
I
about
didn't
race.
ask you that. I asked you. Remember, I made it easy.
But she says, I didn't ask you that. I didn't ask whether it was about race. Yes, but that's vital to her argument against him. If her argument is going to hold, she's going to have to say it is about race. But in fact, if Trump is being targeted with the indictments and the charges that are being brought against him, but Biden isn't for allegedly the same thing, and both of them are white, that's not an issue of race. There's something else systemic there. And so she says, I didn't ask you, but that's vital to what she's assuming and what she is presenting against him and arguing against him. So over and over and over, what I'm noticing is he's addressing her points and refuting them. And instead of acknowledging, hey, you have a good point there. Okay, I retract that. No, she'll just continue with it and just try to spin it.
Easy for you, and I took race out of it. Remember, I said I'm just talking about the system. I'm just talking about the system.
If you want to ask me whether I believe Donald Trump is being treated the same way as Joe Biden and is being treated the same way as Hillary Clinton, all these people are white. All these people are white. There's a double standard.
Well,
Mr. Elder, you didn't hear my question.
You said that
you didn't hear my question.
You said some people commit crimes, so you do believe that Trump, Giuliani, they committed a crime.
I don't know.
But you just said some people commit crimes.
I said some people committed a crime. I didn't say Donald Trump committed a crime. If you ask me specifically whether I believe Donald Trump committed a crime, I don't.
Specifically about those people and why they ended up in jail. They all got fathers.
Well, Donald Trump's not in jail.
Oh, he got indicted.
Yeah, he got indicted. That's a far cry from being in jail.
All right. So shifting a little bit later in the interview here, we're back to Tislin, who is once again returns to the issue about 20 minutes later. Returns to the issue of who's in charge of the system, and then in the middle of it, she'll change it to no, who created the system, and that's what I was really asking about. And so she's just all over the place. But watch it. We go right back to the system issue, though.
Complaining about the system, and the next minute you're saying the system is fair, the next minute you're saying it's not fair. So that's what I'm saying. There just seems to be a double standard on you and the system, not wanting to be accountable for a system that Black people are not in charge of, by the way, of not wanting to hold both sides accountable when it comes to the system.
The impression I get is she came in to this interview hostile against him with the intention of wanting to make him look bad. That's the impression that I get. I don't know for sure if that's where she's coming from, but that's the way it comes across, because I don't see a real conversation here between Larry and Tislin, or at least from her perspective, on her end, I don't see a real conversation. I see just a whole bunch of gotcha moments that epically fail and make her look worse every time.
Do I believe Hillary was treated differently and Joe Biden treated differently than Donald Trump is being treated? Yes, I do. Is that an indictment about whether or not America is systemically racist? No, it is not. Those are
They're two totally different things.
Yes,
You're
yes, they
trying
are.
to merge the two, but they're two totally different things.
I agree with you. They're
But
two
it's
different
still the
things.
system.
No,
It
no,
is still-
we're
it is still the
agreeing. We're
system.
agreeing. They're two different things. We're agreeing.
No, we're agreeing they're two different things. We're not agreeing that there's not systematic racism because we're not in charge of the system, sir. In case you
Okay, okay, all right, all right.
Black people have never been in charge of any system.
Well,
We're not in that vein.
actually, we have been.
Now, she just said black people have never been in charge of any system. Notice she's again saying in charge. She's going to change it to creating the system whenever she realizes that he refutes her and shows that there's all kinds of instances where black people are in charge of the system. He's going to give a whole litany of examples, which he had already given anyway. She realizes she's wrong, so she's then going to shift it to say, well, who created the system, though? But who created it? As if that's somehow relevant to the thesis of systemic racism. Because even if you have a group of people who created, institutionalized racism, well, if now you have black people in charge largely of governments and all kinds of, again, the system, instances of the system, well, they're obviously going to change that. And their policies, their judgments, all kinds of things. They're obviously going to change that. So you would no longer have that. And that's what he's pointing to here. So to even go back to, but who created it, irrelevant, because he had already conceded that America had at one point in time been systemically racist. But he wants to say that is no longer the case. At the very least from the 80s, that is no longer the case. He says even maybe earlier than that, but at the very least from the 80s, America is no longer systemically racist. Now, he does say that there is racism, of course, but that's not the same thing as institutional racism. But he does say prior to that, there was institutional racism. But what she's getting at here and who created the system, that more pertains to how it used to be. The question is it still here? Is it still systemically racist? He gives a bunch of facts to show that that isn't the case, and then she just shifts because she realizes she's wrong.
Baltimore.
No, we've never been in charge of
May I finish?
Tell me, what financial system are black people in charge of? What healthcare system are black people in charge of? What government system are black people in charge of?
I'm about ready to tell you.
What prison system are black people in charge?
I'm about ready to tell you.
I'm not talking about mayors. I already know that talking point, sir. I go on Fox News all the time as well. So let's not go there with that. I said, what system have we created? Have we implemented that we have been in charge of?
He just mentioned mayors, and he also mentioned a black president. And she says that that's not relevant. Okay, I'm pretty sure the government, on the local level, whether a mayor or the federal level, as the president, I'm pretty sure that does pertain to the system. Pretty sure the government is relevant to the system of the United States. So obviously he's answering her question. She just doesn't like the answer because it undermines her bias that she brought into this discussion. It doesn't sound like she has an open mind on this question. It sounds like she just has a whole lot of emotions and she has a whole lot invested into this thesis that it just sounds like she's not willing to reconsider it.
Talking point, sir. I go on Fox News all the time as well. So let's not go there with that. I said, what system have we created? Have we implemented that we have been in charge of? Name one.
Is this why you don't like talking to black women, Larry Elder?
Wow. Baltimore, Freddie Gray.
All right. First of all, I love right there the way Larry responded, because for some shallow reason, Charlamagne, once again, out of the profundity and out of the depths of his intellect, he thinks that it's somehow appropriate and relevant to ask that silly question. Instead of engaging the facts and the stats, instead of engaging that, he just automatically just shifts to a silly question like that. Is that why you don't like talking to black women? What kind of disrespectful question is that? He's all throughout the interview getting in these cheap shots against Larry, all throughout it. And you know what? At the very end, it's going to be epic because Larry puts him in his place. I love it.
Fox News all the time as well. So let's not go there with that. I said, what system have we created? Have we implemented that we have been in charge of? Name one.
Is this why you don't like talking to black women, Larry Elder?
Wow. Baltimore, Freddie Gray a few years ago.
That's mayors. I'm not talking, I said system.
I'm
Remember,
going to
you like
tell
the
you
word
about
system.
this system if you allow me to finish my point.
I'm not talking about somebody elected and doing a job, sir. I asked what system did we create? What financial
Okay, let's
system
talk
did we
about the
create?
system of one of the largest.
Did you hear that? Sleight of hand. Because obviously he is answering her question. Mayors, that's part of the system. President, that's part of the system. AGs, that's part of the system. Bar Association, Fortune 500. I mean, it's all part of the system. She doesn't like that. So all of a sudden she switched to who created it. And she said, I didn't ask that. This is what I was asking. Who created it? She's just jumping all over the place instead of just conceding, you know what, Larry, you have a good point there. I haven't considered that. I might have to reformulate my position here. There's a whole lot of arrogance and pride here when a person is unwilling to just say, well, okay, maybe I'm wrong about that. I need to reformulate my position. She's unwilling to do it. And so instead, to save face, to not look bad in front of millions of people, she just switches her position. And what she switches to doesn't help her anyway. So it's quite entertaining to observe all this.
Thank you. One of the systems of one of the largest cities in America, Baltimore. Freddie Gray died in police custody a few years ago. The mayor was black. The head of the police department was black. Number two,
it's not in charge of the system, but go ahead.
Number two person in charge of the police department was black. All the city council.
What, she really thinks that the government has nothing to do with the system. What system are you talking about?
So Democrats, majority black.
Still not in charge of the system.
Wow.
That's a position.
6 officers charged, 3 of them were black. A judge before whom 2 of the officers tried their case found him not guilty was black.
Still not in charge of the system.
Let's watch that again. I love it. He just says, wow.
Have been in charge of, name one.
Is this why you don't like talking to black women, Larry Elder?
Wow. Baltimore, Freddie Gray a few years ago.
No, that's mayors. I'm not talking, I said system.
I'm going to tell you about this system if you allow me to finish my point.
I'm not talking about somebody elected and doing a job, sir. I asked what system did we create? What financial
Okay, let's talk about the system of one of the largest. Thank you.
Man.
One of the systems of one of the largest cities in America, Baltimore. Freddie Gray died in police custody a few years ago. The mayor was black. The head of the police department was black. Number two,
it's not in charge of the system, but go ahead.
Number 2 person in charge of the police department was black. All the city council, Democrats, majority black.
Still not in charge of the system.
Wow.
That's a position.
6 officers charged, 3 of them were black. A judge before whom 2 of the officers tried their case found him not guilty was black.
Still not in charge of the system.
The city intendant of public schools was black. The county superintendent of public schools was black. The attorney general at the time, Loretta Lynch, is black, as was the president of the United States, was black. And yet,
still not in charge of the system. I asked you a simple question, sir.
Well, Wanda Sykes said when Barack Obama got elected, how are you going to complain about the man when you are the man? Now, from the president to the attorney general to the state attorney to the mayor to the head of the police department to the commissions of the schools in the city and in the county to the majority of city council in that city, all of them are black.
And that doesn't touch on the system in her mind. This is absurd. Of course it does. Okay, and if they are black and there's systemic racism, wouldn't they change those things? They're now part of the system. They're now key components to that system. So it would no longer be systemically racist. And yet, she's still going to say that it's just that.
You're still saying that we don't run anything?
So who's in charge of the
system?
No.
I said who created the system. I didn't say we didn't run anything. I challenged a lot of those black leaders, by the way.
Did you hear that? I didn't say who's running anything. I said who created the system. No. Sleight of hand. Your original question was different. Your original question had to do with who is in charge of the system, which is who's running things, right? Oh, I didn't ask about that. I asked who created it. No, you did ask about that. And who created it has nothing to do with how it is today anyway. So this doesn't help you. You just made yourself look like a fool. So it would have been a lot more productive if she had just taken a little bit more humility here and just said, okay, you got some good points there. I'll consider that.
way. I said, who, when we talk about the system, what black people have been in charge of any system? I'm not talking about a position. I'm not talking about a mayor. You know,
so you're basically saying that they're black faces that are still in those positions, but they're still
correct. Similar to you, Mr. Elder. You're a black face in a position in the conservative movement. They're just the same. They're just on the other side. I'm talking about.
So then, when Martin Luther King said in 1966, I believe there could be a black president in about 40 years' time, then it really doesn't matter whether there's one or isn't. Nothing changes. He was naive. He was naive then.
Killed him as well. Well, we know that the FBI and the CIA also killed him. That system. You realize that, correct?
Wow. An individual.
I couldn't handle this part. This part I just busted out laughing when I originally saw it, and I'm still laughing now. I mean, wow. Look at this. She says that the FBI murdered Martin Luther King, and she wants to, come across as if Larry is an idiot. He's stupid. Like, you don't know that he was murdered by you know this, right? And she tries to make him look stupid. And watch what Larry does. I love this.
Could be a black president in about 40 years' time, then it really doesn't matter whether there's one or isn't. Nothing changes. He was naive. He was naive then.
Killed him as well. Well, we know that the FBI and the CIA also killed him. That system. You realize that, correct?
Which also doesn't relate to what he's addressing here. So she's still not addressing the issue.
Wow. An individual killed him.
Right. That was also part of Pro Hotel through the system. Correct?
Yeah. Not correct. Not correct. He was
so
killed.
The FBI didn't have anything to do with it. The CIA didn't have anything to do with it.
Edgar Hoover was definitely on Martin's ass. Like, come on.
I didn't say he wasn't. No. Robert Kennedy is the one that approved the wiretaps. But to say that the FBI killed him, I mean, what's your evidence of that?
Oh no,
that's a pretty serious charge.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Pretty serious charge.
Yeah.
Serious charge requires serious evidence.
Yeah.
What is your
Okay, so that was pretty much the end of that. And so she is just jumping all over the place. It had nothing to do with the question of systemic racism. He had sufficiently refuted that. He brought up a good point with Martin Luther King, and she couldn't address it, so she just made a beeline to this conspiracy that, the system killed him. And wait, what? Where's your facts for this? Oh, well, you do know this is the case, right? Okay, but where's your facts for this? That's a pretty rash and bold claim to make without some very serious evidence, which she doesn't provide. She came up empty-handed because she had an opportunity to present it right then and there and say, well, here's the facts. She doesn't do that because at the end of the day, she bought into a wild conspiracy without real support for it. And then I have to ask the question, well, if that's the case here with this conspiracy, what other conspiracies has she bought into without support? Perhaps the conspiracy that there is still systemic racism in the United States. Might that be another example? Another claim that is unsubstantiated that she has bought into? And in fact, there's evidence to the contrary of? I mean, maybe. I mean, her discernment is not looking very great at this point. So I have to question everything else that comes from her mouth at that point.
I was talking about the
evidence.
Yeah.
What is your...
All right. So we're skipping a little bit here. Now, here is an epic part. This is where I feel Larry really handled himself. He handled himself very well throughout the whole thing, but he really handled himself very well and very professionally here. But he also puts Charlamagne in his place because all throughout the video, he's just been taking cheap shots against Larry and shots that are clearly implying that Larry he doesn't really know he's black, that he doesn't serve the black community, that he's against the black community, that he's racist. I mean, all of that is just kind of implied, that he's more white than he is black. All of it is just constantly implied in the shots that he's taking against him. And I love how Larry spins it on him. Watch this. This is just epic.
I know you probably got to go. Have you ever heard of the term wake-up call?
All right, now that's bleeped up, but he obviously says the N-word here, a wake-up call, N-word wake-up call. He says, have you ever heard of this before? And he's going to define it for us.
No.
It is an incident where a person of color forgets that they are of color and are reminded rather brutally by an unexpected act of racism. Have you ever had any of those?
Oh, brother.
I'm just asking. You think you've ever
Well,
had
I'm acutely aware, Charlamagne, that I'm a black person, just as you are a black person. And when Joe Biden insulted you by saying, you ain't really black, we don't know whether or not you want to vote for me or vote for Donald Trump, It seems to me that should have been a wake-up call on your part.
Oh! I gotta see that again.
On his ass. Like, come on.
I didn't say he wasn't. Robert Kennedy is the one that approved the wiretaps. But to say that the FBI charged.
What is your... I know you probably got to go. Have you ever heard of the term wake-up call?
No.
It is an incident where a person of color forgets that they are of color and are reminded rather brutally by an unexpected act of racism. Have you ever had any of those?
Oh, brother.
I'm just asking. You think you've ever
Well,
had
I'm acutely aware, Charlamagne, that I'm a black person, just as you are a black person. And when Joe Biden insulted you by saying, you ain't really black, we don't know whether or not you want to vote for me or vote for Donald Trump, it seems to me that should have been a wake-up call on your part.
Boom, bam, bop, bada bop, boom, pow.
That's what comes to mind right now. Wow. Okay. And in case you're not familiar with this, here's the clip.
And when Joe Biden insulted you by saying, you ain't really black, we don't know whether or not you want to vote for me or vote for Donald Trump, it seems to me that should have been a wake-up call on your part.
Listen, you got to come see us when you come to New York, VP Biden.
I will.
It's a long way until November. We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
How dare this guy come in here and insult you, a black man, and tell you you got to think a certain kind of way? I'm amazed that you weren't mad about that.
I'm not gonna say it upset me, just like I'm not letting you upset me. You know what I mean? I don't tend to get upset over things like that. But what I did say,
well, you just not talk about a wake-up call, and it seemed to me that should have been a wake-up call on your part to have a white guy come in here who also said, by the way, about Mitt Romney, because he didn't want to put more regulations on Wall Street, going to put y'all back in chains. And Joe Biden has lied for decades about his civil rights record, claiming that he desegregated movie theaters and restaurants in Wilmington, Delaware, when he didn't do any of that. He lied and said that he tried to visit Nelson Mandela during apartheid South Africa. He did not. And he came in here and told you you aren't even black and let you think a certain kind of way. It seemed to me that should have been a wake-up call for you, but it wasn't, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, no, for the record, I'm not a Democrat or Republican.
I didn't say you were.
I think both.
I don't know what you are. I never even asked you about your party affiliation.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, but you are black. And to have a white guy come in here and tell you have to say, think a certain kind of way, otherwise you, quote, ain't black. Wow.
How should I have replied to him, you think?
I mean, he's making a valid point here, because, again, all throughout the interview, he's taking shots at Larry as if he's not black enough, and he's undermining black people. And then he has this other glaring inconsistency in this interview with Biden before he was elected. Yeah, wow. Okay.
What I just now said, how dare you insult me and tell me I think as a human being, let alone as a black person? I don't tell you how to think, Joe Biden. How dare you come in here and tell me how I should think? I'm going to vote for Donald Trump if I want to vote for Donald Trump. And if I want to vote for Donald Trump, it does not make me not black. 20% of black people, black men, as I said, voted for Donald Trump in 2020. Are they not black now? So only 80% of black people, black men walking around are really black, 20% are not because they voted for Donald Trump. How insulting is that? How condescending is that?
I mean, you're probably right, but I didn't take it in that way.
Well, I did. Voting for president.
I love that last part. You're probably right, but I didn't take it that way. He says, well, I did. How did you not take it that way, Charlamagne? Just curious, in what way did you take it? Because I'm pretty sure everybody else took it the way that Larry took it. And I'm quite confident Charlamagne did as well here. He just realizes he's being inconsistent and he got put in his place. This was epic. Go and watch the whole thing. He's running for president. I think he needs like $1 from 40,000 Americans to get up there in the debates and all that. Or go and watch the video. He'll give you more details on it. I haven't really looked a whole lot into it, but yeah, he's running for president, and golly, it was incredibly interesting to watch, because you usually don't see that kind of interaction on the Breakfast Club. They usually get people from the other end of the spectrum, so it was quite delightful to see him smack them, spank them the way he did, and with facts and logic, and the fact that they couldn't engage any of it, not once, didn't engage it. DJ Envy gave a halfway decent, at one point, response to one point that Larry made, and Larry came up with a counter stat. That was about it. So I mean, that was as deep as the response from the Breakfast Club actually went. Aside from that, it was just a whole bunch of cheap shots and silliness. Anyways, I hope y'all enjoyed this. If so, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Check me out also at patreon.com/Reason and Theology if you want to support this channel and get access to extra content. We'll see you later. God bless.
If you're looking to buy or sell a home, office, or any kind of property anywhere in the world, you're going to want to call Real Estate for Life, and they're going to connect you with a Catholic agent. Now, that agent will donate a portion of their commission upon sale, and Real Estate for Life will donate 75% of that gift to a pro-life organization at no cost to you. Call Real Estate for Life at 1-877-LIFE-US1 or text them 248-431-1440. If you care about the pro-life cause, call them now.
Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button and the subscribe button.